The following video contains discussions of armed conflict and its environmental impact. Viewer discretion is advised. This chart shows the top greenhouse gas emitters in the world. If we took the global military-industrial complex and classified it as a single nation, it would rank right here, the fourth largest climate polluter on Earth. At an estimated 5.5% of total global greenhouse gas emissions, or GHGs, the world's armed forces outpace the entire industrialized economies of Russia and Japan. Yet, these immense figures are largely missing from international climate agreements. Historically, national security imperatives granted defense sectors a blanket exemption from mandatory reporting under the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. This created a profound blind spot in global carbon accounting. That blind spot is expanding. In 2024, global military spending hit a record $2.7 trillion. Because defense procurement is highly carbon-intensive, this financial surge actively locks in fossil fuel-reliant infrastructure, like heavy armor and diesel-electric submarines, for decades. Without integrating this massive carbon footprint into our national frameworks, our thermodynamic climate models consistently underestimate the true scale of human-driven heating. We are attempting to balance the global carbon budget with incomplete math. The atmospheric burden of modern warfare breaks down into four specific pillars. The first is direct operational fuel. During combat maneuvers, an F-16 fighter jet consumes aviation kerosene, generating roughly 7,150 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent every single hour of flight. On the ground, heavy mechanized formations run on high-sulfur diesel. A Leopard 2 main battle tank navigating rough field conditions burns hundreds of liters of fuel to move just 100 kilometers, creating intense emission spikes. The second pillar is the upstream manufacturing of the munitions. Producing explosive materials like ammonium nitrate requires the Haber-Bosch process, a highly energy-intensive industrial procedure that fixes nitrogen with hydrogen to produce ammonia. This generates a massive supply chain carbon footprint long before a weapon is ever fired. The third pillar encompasses landscape fires and the loss of carbon sinks. Artillery detonates across forested areas, igniting wide-scale fires. Simultaneously, millions of displaced civilians in austere refugee camps must harvest local biomass like wood and charcoal simply to survive, accelerating regional deforestation. Finally, the fourth pillar is post-conflict reconstruction. Rebuilding shattered urban centers requires millions of tons of Portland cement and structural steel. These materials carry enormous embodied carbon, which is the total greenhouse gas emissions generated during their extraction, manufacturing, and transport. The climate cost of warfare extends far beyond the immediate battlefield. It initiates a cycle of environmental degradation and carbon release that continues decades after the fighting stops. In the first 36 months of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, total attributable emissions reached an estimated 237 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. A significant portion of this comes from intense combat igniting severe landscape fires across Eastern Europe. The continuous burning of forested areas and agricultural topsoils physically degrades the environment's ability to absorb carbon, turning regional carbon sinks into active carbon sources. Looking at the Gaza conflict, researchers project an environmental toll of up to 61.4 million metric tons. The vast majority of this projection does not come from immediate explosive detonations, but from the immense embodied carbon required to eventually clear and rebuild this completely devastated urban infrastructure from scratch. Systematically destroying urban density guarantees massive future emissions. We are forced to spend a massive portion of our remaining global carbon budget simply to restore baseline living conditions for the survivors. Severe military emissions are not confined to full-scale, prolonged wars. Localized border hostilities, like the persistent skirmishes between India and Pakistan, generate substantial recurring emissions. When entire squadrons of fighter jets and aerial refueling aircraft are placed on high alert for continuous combat air patrols, their daily carbon footprint rivals that of a small commercial airline. Even routine training carries a heavy toll. Recurring peacetime events like NATO's Steadfast Defender 2024 exercise generated an estimated 4.3 million metric tons of emissions, driven by extensive troop deployments and complex logistical supply chains. In periods of relative peace, the continuous maneuvering and global posturing of modern armed forces place an uninterrupted burden on the atmosphere. Because the defense sector largely operates in secrecy, traditional state-reported fuel data is highly opaque. So how are independent scientists calculating these precise figures? The global scientific community turned to orbit. The launch of advanced Earth observation satellites, specifically the Copernicus Sentinel series, provided the necessary spectral resolution to track military activity from space. This map shows data from the Sentinel-5P tropomi instrument. Tropomi is a satellite sensor that measures the concentration of trace gases in the Earth's atmosphere. By mapping localized spikes in nitrogen dioxide, or NO2, scientists have a direct, visible proxy for high-temperature fossil fuel combustion and explosive detonations on the ground. At the same time, VIIRS sensors, instruments designed to collect visible and infrared imagery, detect thermal anomalies. This allows researchers to accurately quantify the physical biomass destroyed by conflict-ignited landscape fires. By reconciling bottom-up fuel estimates with this undeniable top-down orbital proof, researchers have finally bypassed the secrecy and closed the military accounting gap. Now this empirical data must directly inform international diplomacy. As the global community prepares to submit new climate targets, known as Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs, for 2035, the environmental performance of militaries can no longer be ignored. Researchers are pushing 3 specific mandates: close the voluntary reporting loophole in international climate agreements, subsidize green alternatives for steel and cement to prevent massive emission spikes during post-war reconstruction, and require transparent decarbonization pathways for the defense sector. To read the full Military Emissions and Environmental Impact Research Report and explore the open-source satellite data for yourself, scan the link on screen. And be sure to subscribe to The Explainer for more deep dives. True global security cannot exist if we continue to sacrifice our climate to achieve it.